I'm so pleased to bring Chris and Jamie Littrell to the studio today for our A Veterans Voice segment. I'm Doc Shauna Springer, and I'm going to be talking with them a little bit about their relationship and how they came to launch the Gravity podcast. Chris is a military veteran of the United States Air Force. Chris, tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, Doc Springer, thanks for having us tonight. I joined the Air Force in 1999 and became a security forces member. I spent a year in Korea, and then we got stationed at McChord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington. From there, I deployed to Iraq for Operation Enduring Freedom, and then separated from the military in 2005 and became a civilian police officer in Washington State.
Okay. And Jamie, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come into the story of the Chris and Jamie Littrell Gravity podcast?
Funny you say it like that. We used to have just a thing between us where we'd go the Chris and Jamie show. But yeah, for years we've talked about these conversations that are important in marriage and decisions and choices in marriage. Hard, easy, funny stories. And then it has turned into this podcast.
It was destined to be. I mean, I've listened to the podcast. I've listened to Marriage Mondays. You guys go back. I mean, when Chris says we were stationed, you were with him from a very young age.
I was. We got married when we were 19. So
started dating before that.
We did.
I tricked her into dating me when I was 16. So
yep, he did trick me into dating him, and here we are.
All right. So tell us about what led you guys to launch the Gravity podcast.
Yeah, throughout both COVID and just the political unrest of the last couple of years, we really saw this polarizing effect in our community, amongst our friends, and we firmly believe there's things to fight over. There's lines in the sand that need to be drawn sometimes, but we felt like people were doing it over things that they just weren't fighting over before. And so we started asking this question of, how do we stay grounded? How do we keep 2 feet on the ground? And somewhere in that conversation, we came up with the saying, 2 feet on the ground, Gravity podcast. And that's kind of what we're exploring. And at the core of that is our mental health and our wellness. Me being a veteran, me being a first responder, I think it's really important to stay healthy. And it hasn't always been that way for me. I went through a tough time years ago. And so it's important for us to broadcast this message and hope to help others.
Can you give us an example of one of the tough things in marriage that's hard but pretty common, and how you've talked about that on the podcast?
Yeah. Do you want to tackle
go for
that
it.
one? Honestly, communication.
Sure.
We've failed at communication so many times. And I think emotional intelligence as well. Those two pieces together would probably be some of the most important foundations to have if we're self-aware and other-aware with our emotional intelligence. And if we demonstrate and practice great communication, it will alleviate a lot of conflict. Now, the times that we've had major conflict in marriage is usually because we didn't do great in communication, or I was emotionally checked out when I was struggling with PTSD. And so my emotions were way off whack, and she was just holding on for the ride.
One of my favorite episodes was when you guys talked about how every date is not a 10.
Yes.
Yeah, the disciplines of dating.
Yeah, it's just not, right. You might get some ones in there, you get some nice, 5 or 6. Sometimes you get a 10, but I think setting expectations, as somebody myself, I've been married over 20 years, dating married to my husband for about 25, not as long as you guys, and I'll never beat you. But yeah, not every date is a 10. And so I think it's so valuable for people to have the example of a couple that loves each other through thick and thin, but it's not always easy or perfect.
Yeah.
Right. I think normalizing that not every date is a 10 and experiencing some of those lower number dates make the higher number dates feel sweeter. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. What have been some of the surprises for you in this process of doing the podcast together?
Wow. It takes 2 takes or 3 or 10 sometimes. The overall process, it's a remarkable excuse for her and I to try to examine our foundations.
Right.
It's a remarkable excuse for me to reach out to remarkable people and ask them, hey, can I talk to you? And have these conversations. And, before we did talk about the foundations of our marriage, and we would sometimes get into that kind of stuff. But anytime you're trying to mentor other people, it forces you to really get down to into the weeds of why does this work or why doesn't this work, and then make decisions from there of how to make it better or how to replicate it.
One of our favorite episodes is 15, and we were talking about infusing fun into your marriage. And a story that we like to tell is probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, we were delivering cookies to first responders in our area as an outreach sort of time. And we delivered to the police department.
Average Joe Schmo cop.
Receives the cookies, very grateful.
Nice guy.
And we move on to the fire department, and the under 25 crew was working.
This was going to get crazy from you in a second.
They might have been shirtless. In my mind, they were shirtless.
They're still shirtless in my mind. Lots of muscles, lots of tanned skin.
They were Mr. June, July, and August of the firefighter calendar, just to give you a little background there.
I've got a mental.
Right.
Picture.
As we walk away, Jamie's like, "Oh my gosh, did you see them?" I'm like, "Yeah, I saw them. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you pointing it out?"
And I was merely referencing the fact that he should then become a firefighter.
I don't think that's what she was doing.
There.
So
you were putting his face on the calendar, right?
Yeah.
That's where you went with that?
Right. Right.
The fun part of the story is after that, for the last 15 years, when Jamie sees a firefighter, she takes a picture with that firefighter and sends it to me via text message. So,
well, they grocery shop where I grocery shop. That's not
I think
my
she's
fault.
stalking them, possibly. I don't know exactly. But it's just created
Found
this
the watering hole.
It's been this fun story. Some of our friends jumped in on it when we left the greater Seattle area, because that's where we were living at the time. All of our friends got the plastic fire hats, and they were at our going away party, and they were asking whether they should catch the house on fire and stuff like that for Jamie. And so it's just, again, we got to laugh, right? Life is tough sometimes. Life is really tough. Marriage is really tough.
Yeah.
But if we can sit there and laugh at ourselves and laugh at just life happening, I think it lightens the mood a little bit. It makes it a whole lot more fun for sure.
So where can people find you? Where can people tune into the Gravity podcast?
Yeah, they can find it on pretty much all the major podcast platforms, whether that's Apple or Spotify, Amazon Music, Google. You can also search for us, just search on the internet, 2 Feet on the Ground, Gravity Podcast. It is more identifiable than just typing in Gravity Podcast. There's a few other people out there that like that name, apparently. You can find us on YouTube if you want to see the video versions of the guest interviews that we do, and shoot us a message. We'd love to hear from you if you have ideas of Marriage Monday topics or other guests to interview.
So much fun. I had so much fun coming on your show, and excited to see that episode come out here in the next, whenever you get it ready. So thanks for coming on, guys. 2 Feet on the Ground Gravity Podcast started as the Chris and Jamie Littrell show many, many years ago, and has evolved into this really great podcast that I've really been enjoying. So thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks Doc
for
Springer.
having us.